Started working in 1740 on 29,717 acres. We are now down to 1,367 people. And we're going to start with a welcome from our first selectman, Gordon Ridgway.
Thank you, Priscilla, and thank you all for coming. This is interesting. I think this is the first time this topic has been tackled, and Priscilla said this is mostly how the town works, how the government works, and there's not much difference between the two, as a lot of the town relies on the volunteers. And I look out and I see a lot of people here that are involved, and the people here recently to town, and certainly there's plenty of opportunity to become involved and make this town a better place. It's already a fantastic place, and it relies on a high percentage of people working to do that. Going back in time on a different idea, the people said, what is a selectman? Because it's an odd thing. So wherever I go, I have to explain. Selectman, the board of selectmen first selectman is like a mayor in most other places, but the whole idea, the concept of selectmen goes back to colonial times. Actually, the town of Cornwall is older than the United States by about 36 years. And one of the contributions is still ongoing to the country from small town New England was a sense of democracy. You can imagine this place when the first settlers came. It was very wild. It was very far removed from Hartford, let alone London. So they were able to exercise a high degree of democracy by electing or selecting their own people to govern. And that was a radical idea for the time, because normally, if you lived in England or someplace, you would be ruled by people who had always ruled that piece of land by hereditary, not by election. So again, that is something that still goes on. The town would get together every year, elect different officers. They had things like bounders, where people would actually walk the perimeter of the town to make sure Falls Village wasn't encroaching or something else was going on, or maybe that was the early days of Park and Rec, that they just wanted to hike. No, I think they're probably too busy just to want to hike. But anyway, there was some things. Fence minders was another early office in town, which we don't have anymore. But there are a lot of things, as you see from all my friends here on the stage. There are many things that happen and boards that make things work. And so early on, it was the primary job of the Board of Selectmen. First thing, their first responsibility was to keep the town from starving. They had real winters there. There's talk of having to send out parties to go down to Woodbury, which was the big town at that time, to basically keep the town from starving. So once they got finished that, the next thing was to lay out the roads through the wilderness, through the swamps, construct bridges over the many streams in Cornwall, and lay out the town the best they can, survey it. Even Pine Street here is a very old road. Some of these roads along the river were put on top of Indian trails, and it was up to the selectmen to try to figure out, between competing neighbors, where the road should go, and what is the right level of taxation to pay for all these things. There was scraping to get by, so there was a large amount of electoral turnover in the early days. A lot of the terms were for 1 year, and then they'd throw the people out, or they'd go for different offices, and then they'd be re-elected to do something else. So, bring up to date, we have a lot of different boards, and one thing, the sum of the parts that's unusual about Connecticut is that we do not have county government in Connecticut, so that enables towns like Cornwall to have a lot of authority as far as what our future is, and the rules we live by as far as education, the budget, what is the town going to spend its money on coming up. We're going to grapple with some big infrastructure issues. Already we're rebuilding bridges. We're talking about our plan of conservation development, but we're also going to be talking about should the town have a sewer system in West Cornwall, should the town participate in upgrading the fiber optic cable capabilities to the town, because there are parts of town where there's very slim reception. So again, that's up to the people in this room, it's up to the town meeting process to try to figure out what is the future of the town, what things make sense, what things can we afford to do, what things we shouldn't do. And again, there'll be a lot of, I'm sure, citizen input and a lot of opportunities to do that through one thing I'd stress, but somebody probably already do after me, is there is a survey online now on the website. And again, 20 years ago there was no Cornwall website. We have an excellent website that's run again by volunteers, and there's a survey on there on the town's future, which I think already is 150 or so people have responded, which is a 10% response in a town our size, which shows you the level of interest. So there's a lot of opportunity going forward for people to have input. And again, we have, as a board of selectmen, there are 3 selectmen, and we meet every 2 weeks, and our office is across the aisle there in this building, and people are always welcome to come and see us, stop in, email us, or whatever. People in town aren't afraid of expressing their opinions, and it's a good thing. So anyway, I have to actually be at another place, so I'll stay for a little bit. But if there are questions you have afterwards, for those that don't ask for questions, talk for 2 minutes, probably with my time. But anyway, thank you all for coming, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you, Gordon. Gordon mentioned, and you are welcome to come to the selectmen's meetings. They are the first and third Tuesdays across the hall at 7:30, and we welcome visitors. Gordon has a little bit of help. I believe I saw Richard Bramley come in. Richard, would you stand up? He is one of the selectmen, and I'm the other one. There are your 3 selectmen. Now, when you talk about how a town works and what it does, just like everything else in the world, you gotta follow the money. And I am so delighted. I have 3 people that are going to address the monies in Cornwall. And I'm going to start out with the tax collector, Jean Boutier. And I will warn you, if you have occasion to come to the town hall to see Jean, you are going to meet a wonderful dog as well.
Thank you, Priscilla. Well, I thought that I was going first because I'm the most popular position in town, but apparently that's not the case. When I started this job in 2007, it quickly was apparent that it was much more complicated than I thought. I started out going to 4 8-week classes covering state statutes, collection tools, government history in Connecticut, bankruptcy, tax sales, foreclosures, etc. Each class is followed by an exam and followed by a comprehensive exam at the end for certification. So now I am a certified Connecticut municipal collector. So over 90% of the town's revenue comes from property taxes. So my main focus is to maintain the highest collection rate possible, which is usually about 98%. So some of the tools that I use to maintain that collection rate start off with the annual billing in June for real estate, personal property, motor vehicle taxes, and then in December for supplemental motor vehicle taxes. One of the highest incentives for paying taxes on time is the interest rate of 18% per year or 1.5% per month. For some people that doesn't seem to be enough, so I send out delinquent statements at least twice a year to remind people that are forgotten. I apply liens on unpaid real estate tax in May, and in May I send motor vehicle and personal property tax bills that have not been paid for 4 years to a collection agency. Also bills that have been returned as undeliverable by the post office, and for taxpayers who have moved out of state, they also go to collection. In the past few years, we've also been working with the town attorney's office to collect taxes on real estate accounts that have not been paid for 5 years or more. I also have to do a lot of reports, bi-weekly or weekly reports to the DMV, depending on how much time I have, to release motor vehicles that have been flagged with the DMV for non-payment of taxes once they have been paid. Monthly, I run month-end reports to balance collection records and turn over collections to the treasurer so that she can pay all the town's bills. I balance the tax collector's checking account every month, and quarterly I send a report to the U.S. Census Bureau showing total collections for the previous quarter. There was let's see, I have an annual report of collections and grand list amounts that for the coming collection year that have to go to the Connecticut's Office of Policy and Management. I have year-end reports and balancing before the start of each collection year. I have to prepare a number of reports for the annual audit, which is conveniently in July and August. My annual responsibilities, aside from collecting the taxes and making deposits, I create and submit to the Board of Finance for approval a suspense list, which is required by state statutes. This is a list of motor vehicle and personal property tax bills that are deemed to be uncollectible due to the length of time the bills have been unpaid. And then the following year, these are the bills that will go to the collection agency. I have to code all real estate accounts for the coming tax year that will be paid by mortgage escrow accounts. I work with the tax software support company to prepare the system for the collection year. And I work closely with the assessor on other annual reports that are required by the state. And we coordinate on recording property transfers, certificates of correction, for bills that are reduced or added, and sometimes this requires billing or rebilling. On a daily basis, I handle phone calls, emails, in-person inquiries, provide duplicate bills for taxpayers, title searchers, and provide payment records and a multitude of other things. Thank you.
I'm going to ask everyone to hold questions until the very end. And next we have the head of the Finance Committee. He's someone you got to listen to, and he also prepared some paperwork, which has been distributed to you, or there's more copies in the back.
If you need a copy, raise your hand.
And this is Joe Pryor.
Okay, so I have a little worksheet that I put together. If you look on the one page, has some boxes and it says budget worksheet. And if you look at the top right, our responsibilities of the Board of Finance are outlined right there. We're responsible for the town audit, the annual report, the budget approval, town records, and make sure they're properly maintained, and we determine the mill rate. So I create a little worksheet to help us come up with a mill rate, and you can follow along how we do it. So if you look on this is not even from Cornwall, this property card here, if you look at it, it's actually from another town. I just found it on the internet. This is available for every property in Cornwall. If you have a senior, you can go to the assessor's office. You can request it on any property in Cornwall. It's public information, and if you see here, they look at the size of the building. They look at the age and various factors, and where it says partial valuation, that's the most important part. So they have the appraised value, and then they apply a ratio to that of 70%. So that's the same as Cornwall. Some towns are different, but Cornwall, we also use the 70%. So when you look at the total there, 231, 220, that is what's added to the grand list. So if you flip it over, and we take all the properties in Cornwall, we add them up, we get what's called the grand list. That's the value, the assessed value of all properties in Cornwall. So then, basically, when we're trying to figure out what to tax people, the mill rate is basically a ratio applied against the value of their property to come up with their tax. We basically have meetings most of the year to go over all these expenses. So we're kind of backing into it. We're going to start with expenses. And so we go over, we have meetings. The Board of Selectmen are responsible for about half of the budget, and then the other half is education. We meet with the Board of Education, and we slowly, over the whole year, we work out these issues of how much this is all going to be. Now, if you look on the right there, we have bonds that we have to consider. So if you look at the 2 bonds that we have outstanding right now, there you see the balance and you see what the annual payment is. So we brought that over. And then the capital budget is another thing that needs to be considered. Usually the Board of Selectmen are the ones who come up with that and we approve it. So you see here we have the road repair, school, trucks, highway trucks, fire department trucks. That should say fund, CVFT fund, town buildings. So we add that in so you can see. We have the regular budget, then we add the debt service and the capital budget. Now we have the grand total, and then we subtract from that any other kind of income we receive. So there's investment income, we charge for certain services, like the dump. We get certain grants, we get other types of income. We subtract that, now we know this is the budget short, this is the amount that we need. So we take that amount, so in this case it's $6,095,000, and we divide by the grand list. In this case, because there's been a lot of rounding, it comes out to 16.69. So it's actually 16.62 in Cornwall, but just because I rounded everything, it came out to that. So then what you basically, if you want to determine this person's taxes, you're going to multiply that. You're going to take their assessed value of $231,000, divide by 1,000 because it's a mill rate. You get 231 and you multiply it by the mill rate and you get what your taxes are. That's how it works. Any questions? Oh, we're going to wait for questions till the end. Thank you.
One of the things that I learned being a selectman was that after each meeting, when the public leaves, Richard and Gordon and Priscilla look at all the bills that have to be paid. There are brochures, there are folders. Richard and Priscilla go, and Gordon signs them. But they've already been signed by Barbara Herbst. I don't know anyone in the world that creates more checks than Barbara Herbst, our finance director, does.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Barbara Herbst. I am my title is the finance director, or alternatively, I could be termed the deputy treasurer. My office is the financial arm of the Cornwall's Municipal Administration. By law, I must receive, account for, and invest the town funds. My office is a public office. However, not many people have occasion to visit me because unlike the town clerk and the tax collector, I don't really have anything to give them unless they're getting paid for something. Any taxpayer can inspect the town financial records at any time. Priscilla gave us sort of a little bit of an outline. She said we were to talk about what, why, how, and the outcome. So that was my what. My why. Why do we do this? We have reporting requirements, so we have to stay within compliance of these reporting requirements of a public entity as set forth by GASB, which stands for the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and GAAP, GAAP, which stands for the General Accepted Accounting Principles. And basically the two of these boards decide how we report the information that we keep. And then additionally, there's Connecticut state statute that also decides how we report the information that we have. So that's why I do what I do. How I do what I do? I'm a one-person office, which just means that I don't have any support staff, either seasonally or on a regular basis. I do have oversight from the first selectman, and our elected treasurer, John Green, and also the town auditor when she comes to audit the books. My office manages all the payroll and the accounts payable for the town and the Board of Ed. This past year, I issued over 2,000 checks for the year out of the 12 different bank accounts that I oversee and manage. Every check that's cut in town requires 2 signatures. One is mine and the other is usually Gordon, but sometimes I have to run down and ask Richard to sign a few checks once in a while. Checks are signed, as Priscilla said, as part of the regular selectmen's meetings. In 2018, 22 1099 forms were issued and 117 W-2 forms were issued. So that's 117 employees in our little town, believe it or not. But that does include substitute teachers, and there's a whole bunch of those, so that might be how it gets up so high. We have 3 major funds. The major funds are the general fund, the capital fund, and then a grouping called the special funds. The general fund is where all the budgeted appropriations for everyday activity happens. The capital fund is for the capital projects, and currently there are 25 open capital projects. The special funds have 10 different little funds that make it up. And some of the examples of the special funds are the endowment fund, the food and fuel fund, the town activity funds, the Hepburn Scholarship, the Marie Baum Scholarship, and the Volunteer Fire Department Service Incentive. So to do my work, I have to coalesce my work between 2 separate calendars. The regular calendar year for payroll and reporting to state agencies and government agencies, and then the fiscal year for reporting to the taxpayers and to prepare for the annual audit. And every year at the end of the fiscal year, I prepare schedules and financial reports that are audited by our auditor. Then I compile the town report, and in the back of the town report is the management discussion and analysis, which is a synopsis of all the financial activity of the town for the year. So on the last topic, Outlook, I didn't really have much to say on that, so all I could come up with was the majority of the activity in my office is set forth by outside entities. So my goal is always to stay abreast of any new pronouncements that are issued by either GASB or GAP or the state of Connecticut, and there have been a few new ones that have come down in this past year where they've asked for additional schedules, additional reporting. I have been working on becoming a paperless office to the extent that that's allowable, which isn't much, but I am trying. And I also continuously work on trying to streamline my activity, and that's how I ended up taking over the Board of Ed, accounts payable, and payroll. We're trying, the Board of Ed and the school system is shrinking, so we're trying to make economies wherever possible. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Bob. By way of explanation, not apology, we couldn't do everything in 1 hour, hour and a half about how Cornwall works. So we chose up front not to include schools or churches today. So that is not, we didn't forget them, we just decided this was not the time to do that. But I'm going to switch from the money to something that we all enjoy at the beginning of every month, and that's being told where to go and what to do. The Cornwall Chronicle, Paul DeAngelis.
Thank you, Priscilla. I guess I get to start the non-governmental portion of this presentation. The Chronicle was started 28 years ago by Tom and Margaret Bevins. They brought in Ed Furman, who helped edit the very first issue, and I'm delighted to say that Ed and Audrey Furman have been with the paper ever since, and they're still...
Hold the mic up.
Okay. And are still closely involved with its production. The Chronicle is a non-profit publication, except for a managing editor and typesetter designer, and of course the printer, who gets paid, but she takes very little money. They get modest monthly fees. The paper is put out entirely by volunteers. Every month, a new pair of editors sit down with one of the experienced senior Chronicle directors to plot out the stories to be pursued that month. These 24 editors, along with a score of writers and illustrators, have allowed us to publish and distribute at no cost to every resident of the town a really interesting and entertaining and useful paper about our town 12 times a year, and we haven't missed an issue yet in 28 years. A few years ago, with the help of the Cornwall Foundation, we developed a website where you can read the current and in-back issue online. Just this past December, we redesigned the entire website to make it more friendly for mobile devices. A year and a half ago, we started posting stories, events, and news flashes on our Facebook page. For example, we posted the results of the November 6th election that same night, and this fall we will post the results of the municipal elections as we did a couple years ago. So that's something that you can get by going on the Facebook page of the Chronicle. The calendar that appears in print on the front page of the Chronicle every month is a joint venture hosted online by the town website, cornwallct.org, and maintained by Chris Jorsluk. The Chronicle thrives in Cornwall on account of the incredible talent of the writers, illustrators, and editors, some of whom are in the audience today, I must say, and the strong financial support we get from Cornwall's residents. Most of Cornwall's nonprofit organizations are perpetually in need of coming up with clever new ideas of raising money. The truly great thing about being head of the Chronicle is that we just put a little notice in every month and the money comes in. We don't have to have any special events. It's amazing, and we rely on you guys to do that, and it's amazing. From time to time, there are new wrinkles with the Chronicle. For the 10th anniversary, actually it was the 13th anniversary, I think, we put out this Cornwall Companion, which was some of the best articles from the first 13 years. A few years ago, we put out an 25th anniversary issue. Last July, we put out our first youth issue, and we're hoping to repeat that this summer if we get a little more cooperation and we are able to work something out with the school. For the this past February issue, Jackie Schiller, this is amazing, some of the creative people in town. She came up with, instead of just a regular illustration, she came up with a dozen rebuses that were put on the front, that were distributed throughout the paper. And Annie Kosciuszko, who was the editor for the month, inspired by that, decided to do her Cornwall Chronicle chronacrostic puzzle. I don't know if any of you have figured it out. I got about halfway through and didn't quite finish it. But there is a solution on the website, so you can find that now if you need to. All of this can only continue to happen as we recruit new writers, editors, and illustrators. So please think about what you can contribute in ideas, letters to the editor, and best of all, adding your personal voice to the mix of voices representing our town by volunteering to write for the Chronicle. We need you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. He mentioned nonprofits, and one of our biggest, what's the right word, boosters that we have in Cornwall is our Cornwall Foundation. And Rob Lacey said he would say a few words for us.
The Cornwall Foundation is connected to everything else you're hearing about today. The Cornwall Foundation was organized in 2003 as a grant-making operation intended to make small grants to civic organizations and nonprofits that provide services to people in Cornwall. It has since that time given away about $170,000. It currently gives away about $21,000 every year. Most of its grants are small, they're in the range of $1,000 to $3,000. And we like to give grants to things that are receiving money from other sources as well. We think of ourselves as sort of the final step that's needed to get something done. Cornwall is blessed with a spirit of volunteerism. There are all sorts of people working all the time on lots of different organizations. So very small amounts of money can be put to very good use, and it's very satisfying to fund these little projects. Some of the things we funded, you just heard the website for the Cornwall Chronicle. A few years ago, we gave some money to the Cornwall Association, which is Priscilla's organization, I think to buy that video camera so that people can record events in town. We contributed to the new ambulance for the fire department. We contributed to new heating for the Little Gill. We contributed to air conditioning, which was necessary to preserve the collection of the Historical Society. We contributed to a freezer for the town's food bank. A couple of weeks ago, we authorized a grant to help fund an air quality monitoring station which Cornwall is going to put up to keep track of the effect of the Cricket Valley power plant when it opens. So we're trying to get it in place at the time to establish a baseline for air quality and then see what the impact of that plant would be. We give money to essentially every, I think, organization in the town. I think my favorite in the past year or so has been a grant to the Agricultural Commission for a beekeeping program. When the foundation was organized, it was hoped that it would be the recipient of some large bequests and it would give away money out of an endowment. That has never happened. It has a small endowment that has accumulated over time, but the vast bulk of its budget is raised from annual contributions. So we are continuing in a Cornwallian sort of way to operate on a shoestring, and our ability to keep on doing this is going to depend on people's response. The little mailings we send out every November asking for money. Thank you.
Thank you again. Now, there's one person who's not up here that I was expecting, and maybe he snuck into the audience. Is Ted Larson here?
Is it open?
Ted, our dump director.
It's open today.
It is open
You
today.
did send some materials for people to pick up and have information about them.
Well, I had asked him to come, and you know, it's interesting, I go to some statewide meetings, and I was at a small town meeting with Richard back in, I guess it was January, and I was going around the edges, and it was really interesting because here's the woman who's in charge of mattress recycling in the state, and all she sees is that I'm wearing a name tag that says Cornwall, and she says, "Oh, do you know Ted Larson?" I said, "Yeah, he's our dump man." And she said, "He's the best person to work with." So I had asked him to be here, and I guess he couldn't make it. I know that dump is still open. And the other person I'm not sure that was here that I had asked was Brad Hedden. Brad is not here. So I'm going to jump to the next most important animal person. John Gunther is here from the Little Guild. And we love having the Little Guild in Cornwall.
Is that a pitch?
That's a pitch.
I'll address that. First, I want to share how I got involved with the Little Guild. It has nothing to do with the fact that I've supported them since the 90s. It has to do with the fact that I wrote a letter of complaint. This is what happens when you write a letter of complaint. They ask you to be part of the solution. So I got on the board, and of course I found out that what I complained about I was completely wrong, because so often what you see from the outside is not actually what you see from the inside. But I will say that it really is a demanding board assignment. We have Marjorie Hewitt, who's on our board here with us today. We are responsible for the current and future well-being of our animals, for the funding and the sustainability of an animal shelter organization, which is very expensive to operate. Is one of the things that I learned. So I joined in 2014, and I haven't had a good night of sleep ever since. And I've been president since 2015. And I think when I came in, Jeff Jacobson and I came in at the same time. And I think one thing we realized is that, and this is typical of so many organizations that have started very small, and Little Guild was this small, started by 3 women, and has grown up, is that there were aspects of the organization that really needed to catch up with the size. And I see that in the corporate world as well. I joined a company, my company, we had 18,000 at the time I joined. We're still operating like we had 3,000 people, and now we're 53,000, and we're still, always playing catch up. One of the things that we focused on is really strengthening our governance, bringing in people like Marjorie who have financial experience, people with legal experience, governance experience, but also having people who have much more animal experience. Because I think once we did that, we were starting to find out a lot of things about the risks that we were facing, the things that we needed to focus on mitigating, just things like every time you bring in an animal, all the different diseases they can bring with them. Another thing that we were acutely aware of is that we never had a long-range plan. We don't think one ever existed in the history of the organization. So after we made all those, strengthening the foundation moves that we had to do, we created the long-range plan, which we're now finalizing, and it's focused on really being the organization that the animals and the community needs us to be. And I should say, our constituents are not just the animals. We think that we play a role in creating healthy households in the community. We do things like partner with Susan B. Anthony Project so that, if somebody has to flee a domestic abuse situation, we can take their animal. So that will free them up, because oftentimes they will not leave their animal because they're afraid of what will happen to the animal. So what we've done now is we've created a long-range plan, our first, and really one of the key things is looking at our facility, and our facility is not where it needs to be. We're trying to make the most of it. We moved into this place in 1988. It was a family home that we have Frankensteined over time, which has worked well, but there are things that we can't do. We can't put in a canine quarantine, so that limits us in what dogs we take in. For example, my dog Gus came from a shelter in Waterbury. In lots of those city shelters, the conditions are such that we can't safely bring them into our kennel environment without them being quarantined first. So even the state has said to us, I really wouldn't, pull dogs from some of these local shelters. So we're really limited in that way. Plus we have like drains that are along the floor in our dog kennels, so we can't allow people to walk back there, which is really key to, the adopter experience. You really want to go in and be able to go look at all the dogs. And right now we have to go and we have to, bring the dogs individually. And sometimes we have to do it out in the parking lot, depending on how many people we have. We do training classes out in the parking lot, in the snow, in the winter, things like that. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to put together a case for funding a new facility. And I will say, Cornwall is a big part of us, and we're a big part of Cornwall, and we're hoping that we can find, the land that we need within Cornwall, because we would love to stay here. We obviously have to do the right thing for the animals, but I really hope the community will get behind this, because this is something that is absolutely critical to the future sustainability of our organization. And I will get yelled at if I don't do this. Point out that we are doing, continuing our commitment to Cornwall. We are going to be doing our first Great Country Mutt Show this summer in June. On June 22nd, we'll be here on the Cornwall Green, where we're going to have a competition for things like, wackiest tail, or how many spots you have on your dog. And the night before, we're going to do a gala dinner at Artifacts in Kent. So I hope people will join us, and thank you for continuing to support us, and please adopt from us.
Thank you, John. You can't have dogs without having a great place to walk them. And Bart Jones is our land expert in Cornwall. And he's even brought some pictures with him. If I can help to hold things, I'll be glad to. Bart Jones is our Cornwall conservation head.
Very high tech here. You won't be able to see this in detail, but you'll be able to appreciate the general color. I want to begin by thanking the library and the association for bringing all of us together. Cornwall may have a very small population, but we have a lot of smart people and even more local organizations. This is an important opportunity to share information and work towards a common good. But I'm reminded a little bit of Casey Stengel's quote, "Getting the players is easy. Getting them to play together, that's the hard part." I'm going to take 5 minutes to talk about why we work on conservation of forests and farmland, and then how we accomplish that work. Here's the takeaway from my talk. As I wrote in our October newsletter, Cornwall Conservation Trust believes that with creative, smart development, Cornwall can have both forests and farmland and be economically vital and a great place to live and work. So let's start with why we conserve forests and farmland. And it begins with a sense of place and why we all feel Cornwall is unique. And I'll start with our forests. The green that you see on this, and I apologize to those of you in the back, I can flip it around, means that essentially we live in a temperate rainforest. We're a little bit in a very small scale like the people who live in the Amazon. We have a lot of forest in Cornwall. We also have farmland, not as much as forest, and the really important farmland soils are marked in brown, hard to see, but farming is obviously an important part of Cornwall. And last but not least, we have a lot of water in Cornwall, and luckily it's clean and for the most part cold, and it flows into the Housatonic River, and we happen to have one of the 100 best trout streams in America flowing along our border to the west. Very important to me as a fly fisherman. So, why do we do this? Well, we have a unique role to play in ensuring that we have water quality and wildlife habitat, especially for birds. And yes, you've heard a lot about the decline of insects. That includes the Cornwall gnats. And here's a map showing the greenway. Let's see, yeah, I want to grab that over there. You'll see the greenway there. Forest, follow the forest map. That's it. That's it. You may not know this, but there is a greenway that stretches from New York to Canada. And Cornwall, this is the Housatonic River watershed, and it really just shows basically from the southern part of Connecticut to the Massachusetts border. But this greenway goes on up, and you can see a little bit more of it in this insert, to Canada. And here we are, green and gold, because I think we want to be green to gold in Cornwall. And you'll notice a lot of pink stuff around to the east of where we are, and a little bit to the west and south. The pink stuff is development, no forest. So we are inheritors, if you will, and stewards of a great deal of important forest. And that's important for each of us, for the region, and frankly, for the planet. We are stewards of a lot of natural resources. So that's why we do what we do in conserving forests and farmland, for the good of the community, and frankly, for the good of the planet. So how do we work? Well, 32 years ago, Ralph Gold, Dave Dolinsky, Robert Beers, Ellen Doubleday, Sam Waterston, and other forward-thinking persons established a not-for-profit corporation called the Cornwall Conservation Trust. The mission statement has not really changed over that period of time, and it currently reads, Cornwall Conservation Trust's mission is to conserve open space lands in Cornwall and adjacent towns, and to manage those lands to promote wildlife habitat, forest improvement, water quality, farming, and public recreation. So today, the Cornwall Conservation Trust, and can I have that next board over there?
one here?
No, that one, Gordon's Holder. The Cornwall Conservation Trust has conserved over 2,000 acres of forest and farmland. We're serious stewards of this conserved land. We employ 6 part-time persons, 3 of whom live in Cornwall. Think of that as green jobs. We have a volunteer board of 14 board members. And in addition, we have become accredited by the Land Trust Alliance. That's sort of the good housekeeping seal of approval. It says that we follow best practices. There are 138 land trusts in Connecticut. Only about a third are accredited, and we're pleased to be among those. I also want to say that we carefully evaluate the conservation value of each of our properties before accepting them, either as a donation or making a purchase. As part of that evaluation, we refer to the town plan of conservation and development. So here are 3 examples of how we've conserved forests and farmland in Cornwall. First, through donations. About 2/3 of our 2,000, a little over 2,000 acres have been donated to us. We did not buy them, they were given to us. John Wells was a longtime resident of Cornwall and one of its original thinkers, and I guess we would say tinkerers, a real character. He left the place he obviously loved and where he lived to the Cornwall Conservation Trust to be enjoyed by everyone. And I'm leading a hike there tomorrow at 1 o'clock, assuming it's not too icy. It doesn't look very good right now, but bring your crampons. The second way we conserve land is through purchases. Some land was purchased with private contributions only, but most of the time it's a public-private partnership. And we've purchased about 650 acres over the last 32 years. That's an average of 20 acres a year. Most of that, frankly, has been purchased in the last 10 years, but when you divide the 650 acres over the 32 years of our existence, you can't exactly say we're sucking up all the land in Cornwall. Trinity Preserve is a good example of a purchase. We paid $715,000 to conserve 322 acres of forest. That's when the Trinity Conference Center was up for sale, and they frankly hoped a very rich person would come along and make a McMansion there and live happily ever after. They decided not to do that, but we were very concerned that the forest would be purchased by that wealthy person and everyone would be excluded from it. So we bought it. But we used about half of the money came from the state, and then HVA found a donor, anonymous donor, doesn't live in Cornwall. They donated $200,000 to help us purchase that forest. Finally, we helped Ed Keniston preserve his farm on both sides of Bunker Hill as you leave Cornwall going towards Torrington. We found someone willing to lend Ed enough money to allow him time to go through the almost 2-year process of getting the Connecticut Department of Agriculture to buy its development rights. All of these purchases and conservation efforts take time, and not everyone can put up with the financial burden of that time. And we found someone to help Ed, and Ed now has conserved both sides of Bunker Hill with his farm. So those are 3 things that we do. We accept donations, we make purchases, and we help people conserve farmland. So here's a conclusion. Now, in preparing for this talk, and I'll have the next board there.
The winner is.
Thank you. I tried to get my head around what it means to be, we think of ourselves as a very small town. We only have 1,300 people. But in fact, we're 47 square miles of town. So what does that mean? I was going to compare us to Hartford, but You know, I go to Hartford, I don't really know much about Hartford. I spent 40 years working in Manhattan, so why not compare it to Manhattan? Well, guess what? Manhattan has 22 square miles. Cornwall has 47 square miles. We are twice the size plus of Manhattan. Manhattan has 733,000 people living there per square mile. We have 30. I'm glad I live here. So, clearly, Cornwall has enough land to be both green and vital. And I'll go back to this follow the forest one. Behind that. That's it. I'll go back to this one. Cornwall has an important role in the future of this region, and we should continue to actively conserve our forests and farmland. We want to be a respected partner with the town in going forward with that conservation effort. In fact, our certificate of incorporation says we will accomplish our conservation goals in conformity with the Cornwall Town Plan and in the spirit of respect for the entire community and its people. In fact, I think Cornwall has an obligation to future generations to care for all of its natural gifts of forest and farmland we, the current residents, have inherited. Remember this Greenway map and think about the important role Cornwall has to play. And we look forward to working with the town in the next plan of conservation and development and finding creative ways to conserve Cornwall's unique forested farm character and our sense of this special place. So now please go out and explore Cornwall and our trails. The trail maps are in the back. Being in our forests is a special thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. And of course, Cornwall has a land officer. And today I've given Karen Nelson 2 hats. She's going to talk about her position as the land officer and also what's happening in planning and zoning. She looks at me like I'm crazy. I'm not.
Thank you, Priscilla. I'm not sure I need this. I am pretty much known for being able to project my voice, oftentimes not in the best situations, but what can I say, that's part of my job. My name is Karen Nelson. I am not a Cornwall resident. I live in New Hartford. I've lived there for 30 years. I have great admiration for volunteers because I have been one myself, serving on Board of Ed and the Building Committee and Planning and Zoning and a few other things. I'm on the Open Space Preservation Commission in New Hartford right now. In the town of Cornwall, I came January 2nd, 2007 to the town as the land use person. I had an office that I'd never been in, and I came in taking many roles in big towns. One might have a land use administrator, they might have a zoning enforcement officer, a wetlands enforcement officer, and secretaries for their 3 land use commissions, which is usually planning and zoning, zoning board of appeals, and inland wetlands. In a small town, sometimes that's bundled in one person, and that would be myself in Cornwall. When I came to Cornwall, my first day, I was met by Gordon Ridgway, who gave me a great tour of Cornwall, and then I was introduced to the Inland Wetlands Agency. It's basically an 8-member board. It's not an elected board, it's an appointed board because the Inland Wetlands Agency Commission is the arm of the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. They uphold the statutes that are put in place by our legislators regarding the protection and preservation of wetlands and watercourses. As an enforcement officer, as an inland wetlands enforcement officer, I am an arm of the DEEP and I have some authority. It doesn't get me very far, but I do have that authority. The other two commissions that I serve is planning and zoning. That is an elected commission. It is a joint commission in the town of Cornwall. It is both the planning commission, which is subdivisions, and plan of conservation development, which is spoken about in many terms here, and also the zoning commission. And when you have a combined commission, oftentimes at their week or their monthly meetings, they are wearing both hats in that they're acting in the authority for zoning and for planning. Zoning is an interesting concept, and I'm going to go into some philosophies. Zoning, land use, is regarding the use of land for housing, for uses, whether they be commercial or residential, for open space, for agriculture, all sorts of things. There are regulations, and these regulations have come through probably 80 to 100 years of changes, because the zoning regulations that were enacted dealt with health, safety, and welfare. Cornwall, as New Hartford is a land where you have 2 and 5 and 4 acre zoning, where you don't think so much about what your land means in terms of clean air and clean water. In zoning in a city where buildings years ago were built so close to each other that there was poor air quality, where there wasn't proper disposal of waste, where there was not clean water. A lot of the laws that have come in terms of zoning relate directly to health, safety, and welfare, as they do in Cornwall and other small towns, in the towns that are based on having wells and septic systems have to have lots that can allow a person to be able to do what they need to do to live in their residence, as well as not contaminate their next door neighbor. So some of the rules that we have, as much as people think they might be arbitrary, are usually based on standards for safety and well-being of citizens. So that's wetlands, that's planning and zoning. ZBA, which meets very seldomly, is again an elected body. They are the most powerful board in land use because they are the only ones that can vary the zoning regulations. They're also my policemen. If somebody feels that I have not done my job properly, they are my judge and jury. So those are the 3 commissions I work for. As a land use administrator, it's my job to make sure that all of those commissions work together. As a land use secretary, I am the one that sets up meetings, does agendas, does noticing, keeps minutes. Minutes are very important. They're required for all elected commissions, that minutes and meetings be on file so that you can see what we're doing, who's doing it, why we're doing it, and have some sort of history. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what I do in terms of being a land use official, wearing a lot of hats in the town of Cornwall. I also serve 3 volunteer boards, and these 3 volunteer boards, as I mentioned, are volunteers who have a big hat to wear, because it's really not easy to serve a community and do what everybody feels they need to do. They are great volunteers. I am very pleased, frankly, and I'm a big volunteer, rah-rah. I think you're going to figure that out very quickly. That the people on these commissions have a lot to learn. The rules and regulations are not easy, but it is all based on land use as opposed to people use, going back to health, safety, and welfare. It is not necessarily who you're looking at, whether they're your friend or not your friend. It's whether what you're seeking to do fits the regulations that have been established. So it can be a very thankless job, and I am in the office to try to explain what the rules are for anybody coming in and seeking to perhaps build a house, put a deck on, do activities in and around wetlands, seek a variance to do something that is not accepted or can't be done in the zoning regulations. And it's also my job to try and make people understand that the rules are meant to work together in terms of allowing a person the right to use their property, to have safe housing, to have natural resources in and around them. Natural resources, open space are a big part of planning and zoning. And to have the expectation that everybody that comes to a board or commission is entitled to fair treatment. It is equity, it is it is the land use as opposed to the person that is using it. That is very difficult for volunteers to do in all towns and even in small towns. So that kind of sums up my responsibilities in terms of what I do. I should have written down all these things, but when I always come to a meeting, and I'm one of the last ones to speak, I have to speak for the other people sitting on this stage that are my partners in land use. First of all, is the Board of Selectmen. I answer to Gordon Ridgway. He in some fashion is my boss. He is also a partner in my office. He comes into my office and works with me to try to resolve problems, to give me history. The Board of Selectmen has been very good to me in my office over the past 11 years now, to make sure that my office is funded, to make sure that there's money for the volunteers on our boards and commissions to seek educational opportunities so that they can do their jobs better. We are very privileged to be able to use the library. Margaret, we are afforded a nice warm place for our planning and zoning meetings and for our ZBA meetings. We work with the Cornwall Conservation, or I work with the Cornwall Conservation Trust to make sure that their properties and their permitting works for everybody that is involved. And I work with just about everybody on the stage in terms of things that they do. Little Guild, permitting for Little Guild, and understanding, you know, what a great asset they are, and trying to make sure that when the time comes that the regulations in Cornwall, complements of your Planning and Zoning Commission, are going to be for everybody. Right now, the Plan Conservation Development that Gordon spoke of, that's being spoken by Bart, it's a 10-year plan. The Planning and Zoning Commission is responsible for this plan. There's four parts: natural resources, housing, economic development, and community and cultural resources. It's a 10-year plan in which you have a lot of other volunteers besides Planning and Zoning Commission members that are working to find consensus. The big issue right now is keeping young people in town. There's a lot of us here that are over 35. I would say the majority of volunteers on all the boards and commissions in the town of Cornwall, and even in my town, are over 35, and in too many cases, they're over 60 because of the lack of young people that have the time or care to spend time being volunteers. The Plan Conservation Development that is being formed right now is seeking your input as to how to maintain the balance, to have jobs, to have young people stay, to have vitality, to provide multi-generational housing so that there is not just seniors and young people and no communications in between. I would encourage you, as my office seeks to put everything up on the website. We are very fortunate to be able to use the town website to post our minutes, our meetings, information, and whatever, that we are seeking to put as much information up there and surveys so that we can get our input, or we can get your input town-wide, so that the town plan that comes out is going to provide direction for all of you people here to want to stay in Cornwall. I wish I could move to Cornwall sometimes, but I have a 200-year-old house with some big trees that aren't going to be moved very easily, and so I think I'm going to stay in New Hartford for a while and continue to volunteer. But I'm very privileged and very thankful for having the opportunity to not only work in Cornwall, but hopefully have my office as a place that you can come and find that my job is to be helpful and to support Cornwall for the next couple years that I intend to be here, hopefully. Thank you for your time.
With my other hat on as a realtor, I can tell you that when I have questions about land, Karen's office is always welcoming, and she always has the answer. Not always the answer I want, but she always has the answer. There was one important person, and in fact we're about to be interviewing for this again, but Heather Deneen was asked to be here, and unfortunately due to ill health was not able. So she gave me a couple of comments about Cornwall social services, providing assistance to Cornwall residents through a number of direct services as well as referrals to area service providers. And these services include application assistance for heating assistance via state and local programs, assistance with Eversource bills, winter protection, and NU Start budget programs, access to assistance with application to the SNAP, which is the food stamp, and Medicare, Medicaid programs, referrals to services including VNA, nursing and home care, mental health counseling, low-cost medical and dental care, and affordable housing. The back-to-school and holiday programs for Cornwall children, the Cornwall Food Pantry, located in the basement of the UCC Day Room, is open on Mondays from 5 to 6 p.m. and Thursdays from 9 to 10 a.m. And coordination of rides to medical and personal appointments through area bus and car services, and assistance with applications to area funds to help with medical bills and other unexpected expenses. And the social services office, which is around the corner here, separate building, is currently open Tuesdays and Wednesdays and by appointment, including weekends and evenings. And she's sorry she couldn't be here. But one of the most important people in our whole town is here. God forgive, we have a fire. Fred Scoble is here.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Fred Scoble. Hope everyone's well. Yes, I am in charge of the Cornwall Volunteer Fire Department. I'm in charge of the old children, that I would like to say, who's driving all around with fire trucks with lights and sirens on. It's a time-consuming position, but it's great to be there volunteering for the town. We have 55 members in our town. It's divided up into two different parts. We have the fire side and the EMS side. Most of the members are cross-dressers, as we put it, is both EMS and fire. But in the fire side, we take a fire school. It's about 180 hours of fire school. It takes about 3 months. And on the EMS side, most people are EMTs, which takes a little bit more time. It's about 250 hours and it takes about 4 months to get, unless you do an expedient course, of course. We meet every Wednesday. We have drills every Wednesday with our group of colleagues. EMS meets on Tuesdays, every other Tuesday. Whenever the call goes out, at least a fire call, everyone gets notified because of the loud sirens in town, since we have 3 of them. Fun fact to know, we're the only town in this region that has 3 sirens. Yeah, we are lucky. Yeah, we have 3 sirens, yep. The way that we're able to keep going is through our, what we get from the Board of Finance is through our budget and through our annual appeal that a lot of members are gracious, community members are gracious to give us some money for different items that we need in our fire department. Like this year for our annual appeal, we were able to get new SCBA bottles. Those cost, and we got 32 of them, those cost about $32,000, a little bit more than that. Last year we were able to buy a new boat for the river and the lakes because our other one wasn't doing so well. Yeah, basically it. You guys got any questions? I'll leave it in that.
Well, you've heard a lot about us. We have a great history, and we have a wonderful Cornwall Historical Society, and Lisa Samant is here to tell us about it.
Thanks, Priscilla. I wanted to talk a little more broadly about volunteering in general for nonprofit organizations. The town boards and commissions that you've heard from, like the Board of Finance and Planning and Zoning, are really have what they do guided by state statute. They have thick books of directions for what their members are supposed to be responsible for. But nonprofits are guided by principles like governance, due diligence, and a strong sense of mission. And I think I've certainly find that with the board of the Historical Society. And also the other boards you'll hear from the library shortly, and Bart's Conservation Trust. Good active board members. Basically what we're doing now is the current era of volunteers is building on work of a great many people in this town who's established these organizations. I see out in the audience Jenny Potter, who was president of the Historical Society and the librarian here in town for years, and is sort of an institutional memory for those two organizations. But I think back to my childhood here, when Polly Calhoun, Katie Walker, some of you know these names and knew these people. They were just extraordinarily competent, good builders of this town. We need all of us to find a way to keep this tradition of volunteering going. Alexander de Tocqueville, when he was here many, many years ago, one of the things that astonished him the most about America, and he was astonished by a great deal of it, was the tradition of volunteering. That if somebody's barn burned down, the whole town gathered and built another one and supported efforts like abolition and prohibition, all sorts of activities. So at the Historical Society, we're part of the same nonprofit environment that other organizations in this town are facing. We've got demographic changes to cope with. That leads to changing funding environment as some of the older members of the community die off with their strong traditions of philanthropy. We have to train new philanthropists. One thing boards, all of them really, in town offer to people who have not yet become involved or are involved in their families a great deal. It's a great opportunity to learn how to run an organization. You can learn what a treasurer does, what a secretary does, what a board's role is in managing an organization when there is one paid staff member. All those calculations of management. Anyway, as I mentioned before, maybe the town boards are guided by state statute, but boards like the Historical Society shape our own agenda. We did a strategic planning exercise in 2017 that told us that we need to pay more attention to our collection itself, to be sure we knew what it was, possibly even who gave it to us, and how we could do our best to conserve it. But there are other questions too. How do we collect in the 21st century, or even say since 1950? What should we be doing about that? We need to engage this community in that discussion. What do you expect us to do? What do you know that we don't know? That's a good back and forth opportunity. How are we going to deal with social media when the average age of the board of directors of the Historical Society is somewhat north of 35, let's face it. But basically, I feel that our job on this board is to know who our constituents are and to meet their needs the best way we can. We're having a wonderful new curator now who's developing her understanding of the town of Cornwall. She lives in Southbury, and expects to raise the first parts this summer of a new exhibit of the history of Cornwall. She'll be working with Jeremy Brecker and some others of us to do that. So good things are coming, and I hope you'll continue to support us when we send our little cards and letters out in the mail. The mail is 50 cents, 55 cents a letter now. What does a place like us do with that number? You know, there are really things we have to think about. It's a new world. But think about joining a board like ours, because we need new energy all the time. That goes for all these organizations. It's a good thing to do. Thank you.
And I hope you've learned a little bit about Cornwall today. This was all presented by the Friends Group of the Cornwall Library, which I'm a member, and our librarian, Margaret Haskey, is here. She's going to be in charge of wrapping it up. She's going to be in charge of letting you ask questions. And I'm thinking of all the things that I should have said and haven't said, but I've enjoyed it. Here you go, Margaret.
Thank you very much. There's a lot to say about our wonderful Cornwall Library. I'd like to start by saying that the library was established 150 years ago this year, so we are celebrating our 150th anniversary. And the main activity that we have planned so far is a townwide party to be held on May 18th at the, it's going to be held at the Trinity Center. So 150 years ago, the library was established in the study of the Reverend E.C. Sanford with a collection of 312 books. So that was then, and now we have this beautiful building next door. We have 30,000 items available to the public, and mostly books, recorded books, a lot of movies, magazines and newspapers. We also have services available, which I'll get into a little bit later. So the library is run principally by the board. We have a 13-member board, and they establish the sort of overall goal of the library, the overall purpose of the library, and then my job is to carry out their mission. And I have a small staff to help me, and as Lisa was saying, we have a tremendous number of volunteers to help, and we really could not run the library without the volunteers. And the board does a lot of real hands-on work too. We are not a municipal library. We're not part of the town government. We're an independent library association. So we're responsible for all of our own expenses. The town doesn't fund us except through one sizable grant. The town gives us about 25 to 30% of our budget each year, which is very nice. But that means that we have to raise over $100,000 every year to keep the library open. And that's why I have a bowl back there right now with some dollars in it. And that's why you'll see that pretty often. Most of our income comes from our annual appeal, which we mail out once or twice a year. And we have a large number of very generous people in town who help us. I have put some brochures in the back there that list a lot of the specific information about the library. People who've donated, how our money comes in, how our money goes out, and that's available for you to look at. I thought you might be interested to know how we choose our books. We have a book selection committee that meets every 6 weeks, and they look over book reviews, and that's how we choose our books. Unless somebody comes in and asks for a book, and very often this will happen, someone will come in and say, oh, my sister-in-law said I should read this book, and we don't have it, and so I'll find it in another library. And it'll be checked out everywhere. And that's how I know, okay, so we have to buy this book, and maybe we have to follow that author. So a lot of our collection is brought in through our very good book selection committee who chooses the books, but a lot of it also comes from the public who tell me, I want to read this, or I want to read that, or I want to see this, this mini-series. And so we make those purchases. So it's a lot of it is in response to what the public asks for. In addition to the books and the magazines and things you expect a library to have, the Cornwall Library, like a lot of libraries, has become something of a community center. We offer a tremendous number of events. And I was just going to go over, in our little library, next month, these are the things that we're doing, just by way of example. We always have yoga, Pilates, Zumba, and Mahjong every week, some of them several times a week. We're having 2 classic movies. We're having a course of pastel paintings. We're having, let's see, 3D printing class. We're having an art reception. We're having a free demonstration of Pilates. Let's see what else we have here. I guess that might be it for that month, but that's a lot for a small library to do. So we're very pleased with that. Some of the bigger activities we have planned for the year, we do have that party on May 18th. We have 2 book sales. We are always having a wonderful art show. We've started having an annual Labor Day art sale, which is a really popular event and a lot of fun and a good fundraiser for us. We're having a Cornwall Reads Cornwall event in the fall, and our garden tour we'll have once again this year in June. So there's a lot going on there. In addition, we have in the library printers, copiers, we can fax, we can scan, and we can help you out with your computers, we can help you out with your questions about the town, questions about a number of things. People come in with a lot of questions, and either about a website they're trying to find, or it's surprising how many questions people come up with in the library. And we do everything we can to help respond to the public in every way that we can. We're very happy to be there. We're very happy to see you. And I know that with all the volunteers and help we have, we'll be able to continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank Richard Griggs. Once again, he's photographed all of this, and it'll be up on YouTube later. And he's also a good friend. And are there any questions? There are quite a few people here who can answer them. Yes, Simon.
Rob, what's that power plant you were talking about that you're going to be monitoring the air quality for?
The Cricket Valley power plant is being built in Dover Plains. It's going to be the biggest power plant around. It's supposed to replace part of New York State's nuclear capacity as well as a bunch of gas-driven capacities. It will be a gas plant. It was permitted by the state of New York on the basis that it would be put up on the border where all of its emissions would drift across into Connecticut. And Connecticut had no input into the permitting process at all. So a number of towns are doing things. You will see in the Lakeville Journal occasional protests and efforts to oppose this construction. It's probably too late. But we're trying to establish a baseline of the air quality so that we'll be able to tell whether it's impairing the air quality in the towns around here. The Kent School has already installed a monitor, and we're hoping that Sharon will put in a monitor as well.
Thank you.
As a matter of fact, the foundation is funding a third of it. The selectmen at our last meeting requested, and we're going to raise the balance so that we can have the $4,700 unit put here. The Kent School, private school, has paid over $47,000 to have the main one there. What we're trying to do, these surrounding towns, Warren and Washington have already done it. We're trying to get our equipment in place prior to the opening of Cricket Valley so that we can have a report on the current air quality. So we'll be able to see if it's getting worse. It depends what kind of filters they put in these huge smokestacks they're putting up. We don't know that. Are there any other questions? Yes.
I was wondering before you asked that question, do you know where you're going to be putting those?
Do we know where?
Air quality.
Where are they going to put them? The monitors?
Oh, well, the one is on the Kent School campus. In Cornwall, it will probably be, well, the recommendation was to put it on the town hall. It'll be a small unit. And they're recommending that it be not in an area where there's a lot of emissions. Well, in the village, there are no emissions. And I understand it's only about the size of a large briefcase. So, anything else? Well, I want to thank these dedicated people who came to help us let you know a little bit about how Cornwall works. I, for one, have only been here since 1975, and I love it. But it's interesting, when Fred was talking about the only town to have 3 sirens, well, many of you know that I live in the old Cornwall, West Cornwall Chapel. And of course, when I first bought it, I still have the bell. And if friends came to visit, I'd let them ring the bell. And I remember one day walking over on a weekend to buy some meat from Freddie Bates in his meat market, and I walk in and he says, "So where's the fire?" Apparently, that at one point, Fred, had been the fire alarm for West Cornwall. Well, if you hear my bell ringing now, it's either Halloween and somebody's come by in costume, or a friend has popped in. If you want to pop in, we'll let you ring the bell. Thank you so much for coming.